Hello, guys. Hello. Welcome to another live. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the refugee process. So, if that is a topic that interests you, welcome. Please note that we are live on TikTok and on YouTube. So, both places we are live, and I'll be answering questions on YouTube and on live as well, if there are any. And yeah, tonight is just another session. I like to have these sessions at least once a day. Generally, I have them in the evening so we can reach more people. So, again, welcome. We're talking about asylum process inside Canada, so we can get right into it. My lives, I like to center around a little bit of me talking, a little bit of answering questions. I find that most of the time I'm just answering questions, so that's totally okay too. Thank you, Crypto, for the gift. I appreciate it. Um, just a few things to remember, guys. I am going to actually be a little bit more specific with the questions I answer. Unfortunately, I will no longer be answering case specific questions. I don't. I think it's best to keep it just generic questions from now on. So please do keep that in mind. The reason why is that I'm trying to maintain everyone's. It is your job to maintain your own confidentiality, but I think it's best to not go too into details about cases because even though I preface and say that nothing is meant to be legal advice, I think it's important for me to center the questions I answer around things that are not so case specific. If you have questions, I do offer a 15-minute consultation for $80, which you can use that 15 minutes to get questions answered. So yeah, I'm going to keep my consultation specifically for case specific situations. And tonight I'll answer specific, like generic questions, like, oh, how would, Bill C-12 work or things like that. So please remember, guys, don't ask questions that are case specific. I might skip over it. Okay, so we're going to keep that in mind. And without further ado, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about refugee claim. So if you guys are new, welcome. My name is Banish. I am an immigration consultant in Canada. I specialize around refugee and IRB specific cases. I do everything from a refugee claim to removal orders to residency obligations and refugee um, uh, sorry, not refugee obligations, residency obligations and residency appeals. And yeah, and I do detention reviews as well. So, yes, that is me. Again, welcome. Tonight, like I mentioned specifically, we're going to be talking about refugee around that area. And essentially, the refugee claim is, an asylum process in Canada. It is a forgot the word, adversarial type of application. It's not just an application that you send in. There is multiple elements involved in it, including a hearing, and there are technically two steps for a refugee claim. There is one where you go through the Immigration Refugee Citizenship Canada, and the second one is the going through the Refugee Protection Division with the IRB. Now, specifically, the part that you go with IRCC, so when you submit your application, you go into queue, you do your steps with Immigration Refugee Citizenship Canada, and then if you're successful, you get referred to, if you're found eligible, you'll be referred to the Refugee Protection Division at the Immigration Refugee Board. Now, if, I'm going to explain a little bit more about the process, if for whatever reason your claim is rejected, you might be eligible for an appeal at the Refugee Appeal Division. There are about four divisions in in the IRB. There is the Refugee Protection Division, Refugee Appeal Division, Immigration Division, and Immigration Appeal Division. At the Refugee Appeal Division, that is where you appeal and you state that you do not agree with a decision. Thank you, Hidris, for the gifts. I really appreciate that. But guys, please remember, they're not necessary. I swear I will answer questions as best as I can. Um, And also, thank you, Junior, as well, for the gifts. Again, guys, totally not necessary, but I appreciate all the kindness that you guys give too. Um, so let me go a little bit to the questions, and I'm going to come back and pick up where we left off for refugee. Sorry, I was talking about the refugee process. Okay. Can you deal with a work permit while inside Canada? Valdo, what do you mean? Can you deal with it? Can you be a little bit more specific? Again, guys, please remember anything I say is not meant to be legal advice. Good evening from Montreal. Are you expecting French draws this year? Thank you for your response. Yes, I have. Yes, we are. And I'll tell you what. I saw conversation that Lena, the minister, had, and believe I can't remember. She was talking about bringing in more physicians to Canada, but I think she also mentioned, or maybe I'm imagining it. I don't know. That one I'll have to go back and check. But um, we are having a lot of draws right now with the French. Anyone who speaks French as well. It does also give you additional points. So yes, I'm anticipating more this year. I have a 430 score. Can you help me? In what sense do you want me to help you? Okay. All right, Hidris. Hidris asked, after referral to IRB, what happens next? So, great question. Thank you for asking. So the next steps are essentially, if you are eligible, if you're found eligible and you are referred to the Immigration Refugee Board at the RPD level, essentially they several things happen, right? You basically wait for your hearing. Now, they might actually ask you to also send, because you'll get like a confirmation letter, and then at the bottom says you have to send your basis of claim. So be very careful of that. But if you're referred, then you go into queue waiting for the hearing. Now, in between that, they could ask you for certain things, certain documentation, certain clarifications. So, always keep an eye out for any communication from Immigration Refugee Board. But essentially, you're just waiting for your hearing to be set. It may take a year or two, or maybe a little bit longer. Um, Mainly has to do with backlog. Sometimes it has to do with your screening. Um, but another thing to remember here is that sometimes some people, when they're screened through the less complex cases, can be found that they might ask for you to go through the file review process, which is essentially the Immigration Refugee Board saying that you might be accepted without a hearing. If that is the case, and you get a letter like that, you might get a letter stating, we might accept you. Please provide these type of documentations by this date. If you provide it, and if they see that there's no issues or anything, then they might accept it without a hearing. You don't have to go through a hearing. However, I've also been in a situation where people have done that, and they still ask for a hearing. So keep in mind, vice versa can happen too. But that's essentially what happens next. If, however, you are not successful and they do not determine that you're a person in need of protection or conventional refugee, then if you're eligible, you might be able to appeal it to the Refugee Appeal Division. But there's very strict deadlines for that. You got to keep 15 days since the day you received the decision, and 45 to send the notice in, and then 45 days to send in the appellant's record, which is essentially your arguments. Now, keep in mind, you're not just saying, "Oh, I'm disappointed I didn't get my refugee status." You have to have actual grounds to appeal that decision. If Sorry, guys, if someone's standing outside my window. If that is the case, sorry, I'm just going back to my last thought. Right, yes. So the appellant's record, and yes, the arguments are, it can't be just, I'm disappointed I didn't get my refugee status. It has to be on facts and law. Um, that you were rejecting, you can argue. Now, there are people who've been successful, there are people who weren't successful. And if that you're not successful, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road yet either. You might be able, with the help of a lawyer, not an immigration consultant, because we can't take things to federal court, to take it to the federal court and argue, that they were incorrect by fact or law. But the lawyer will essentially determine if you're able to do that, right? But you have to do that really quickly too, because there are deadlines for that too. So that's kind of the gist of it, really. That's like a very short synopsis of the refugee process. Um, all right, let me go to some questions and then I'm. Hi, I submitted my study permit application in December 2025, but now, up till now, hi, RCC hasn't confirmed. What are they supposed to I'm just sorry, I'm curious. You're supposed to on your portal get like a submission confirmation. Generally, that comes in like a day or two. I've seen maybe a week max, but you should get a submission confirmation that they have that application. If you haven't received that, maybe check your portal. Yeah, that's essentially it for a study permit. Any hopes for French draws? My work permit is expiring soon. What do you mean hopes? Sorry, I'm a little confused by that. Is it normal to get an open restricted work permit as a refugee claimant? That's a really good question. Finsbury, I personally have not seen that. But perhaps generally when there's restrictions, it's usually like medical related. They'll say like, for example, you can't work with vulnerable people or elderly or things like that. If that's the case, maybe it has to do with your medical. Because with normal work permits, it's generally when someone has not provided updated medical or they haven't done the medical exam. I would be a little bit curious to look into that yourself and see why that was the case. All right. Can you travel to Canada as a foreigner living in Thailand? Yeah, as long as you get a visitor, like some sort of visa or like document to come to Canada, whether you apply for work permit, study permit, or visitor. Is this a normal scenario with IRCC because it's been a while? Um, since December, like again, have you received this confirmation? Oh, my necklace. My necklace is actually Ahura Mazda. It's old religion in Iran. It's kind of like what Iranians wear to kind of symbolize, you know, our ethnicity and yeah, essentially it's an old religion. If someone's claim is denied, does that affect any future travels to other countries? That is something you'll have to ask the country, right? Because sometimes some countries, like Canada is one of them, they might ask you, like, have you ever been rejected for some sort of visa or document or whatever? Um, so that depends on that country. All right. Uh, we talked about the Refugee Appeal Division and that taking it further. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm just gonna go back a little bit to like talking about the refugee process, guys. Um, Now I kind of want to talk a little bit about like documentation, evidence, and things like that. Now keep in mind, evidence is very sorry. Gotta put my wedding ring back on. Um, Evidence is very pertaining to your case, your situation, right? But there is array of evidence you can provide: videos, pictures, medical records, country conditions, news article, reports. Those are like a lot of documentation that you can provide as a refugee claimant. You keep in mind, it's your narrative is very important, but you have to support your narrative, and that's the case for any immigration application, in my opinion. If you're sending a work permit, and you're, saying like, "Oh, I have ties to my home country," show evidence of it. If you're applying for a visitor record and saying, "Oh, I have ties to my home country," or um, I'm financially able to come to Canada and support myself for the period I'm there, you have to show evidence of it. So with any type of immigration application, you generally need to provide evidence of it. Refugee claim is no different. Refugee claim, it is different in the sense that it's a different type of application, and some of the documents you provide is going to be different, right? So with the help of counsel, you can provide very, very strong documentation. Now, and I did forget one point when sorry, I forgot who asked me about the what's next. One important element at the Refugee Protection Division is sometimes the minister will intervene. They'll send you a notification that they intervene, and I believe it's 10 days before the hearing, but they can intervene in your case. If that is the case and they do intervene in your refugee claim, that essentially means that they disagree with you obtaining refugee claim in Canada. Essentially, CBSA or IRCC, one of the minister's representative will come in and say that this individual should not obtain a refugee claim in Canada. It could be for a variety of different reasons: credibility, inadmissibility. Um, those are just the ones. Um, but there's different reasons that they can come and say that they don't agree for someone or some people in that underneath that application to obtain refugee status in Canada. If that's the case, it becomes a little bit more difficult because they're going to be presenting why you should not obtain protection in Canada. Now, I will say this, guys. I've seen the minister's representatives, minister's councils do their thing, and there are some next level. I don't mean to scare anyone, but they come in well prepared. They come very, very well prepared, and let me tell you, the way they review, and it's all the members will thoroughly review the documentation you provide. But be prepared that even if you go into a refugee claim, or even a removal order appeal, or if you go into detention review, or if you go into um, what else is there, inadmissibility, they're well prepared to argue against you, and they have thoroughly reviewed your documentation, and they can use your own documentation against you. And I'll tell you guys why. Some of the more recent cases weren't necessarily refugees, but I want to give you a little bit understanding how the minister councils work. For example, you go into refugee claim and you state something like, for example, just give me an example here. I've never sought refugee in another country. This is my first time seeking refugee in Canada. The minister can come in and be like, "Are you sure about that?" They'll ask you, be like, "So, for example, so you've never sought refugee anywhere?" "No," and you say, "No, I haven't," and be like, "Okay, great. Then why is it that we found this information that you sought refugee in, let's say, United States?" So that hurts your credibility. That hurts you because you're lying, or they catch you in a lie. I always talk about on my channel, credibility is like really important. Um, and if your credibility is ruined, then really obtaining protection in Canada is going to be very, very difficult for you. So things like that happen. I've seen more recent cases where they're like in more like residency, or in one of them was a spousal sponsorship appeal, where the minister, this was a very intense spousal sponsorship appeal. The minister took part of that individual's refugee claim, because it was an individual with um, a, a former refugee claimant, and they were not approved, but they took that information and then in their spousal sponsorship appeal and used it against them, stating that they're not a credible person. And that was one of the main things that we're arguing. But I'm telling you this because I want you guys to get an understanding that they are very well prepared to argue against you. Now, what do you do in these situations? Well, you have to, like, either way, without even like having a minister intervene, you need to be very upfront and very, very, very truthful to the bone about anything and everything, right? if they catch you, even if the minister, even if like the member catches you in a lie, they're going to say that this person is not a credible person. This person's a liar, right? And that's going to make them think that you are not a genuine refugee claimant, and they can reject you based on that. Now, keep in mind, if your claim is found to be rejected on credibility and manifestly unfounded, that can prevent you from being able to appeal at the Refugee Appeal Division too. So remember, consequences, right? Lying, withholding things, omission in immigration to Canada has severe consequences, guys. Now, and I will say the last thing. How does your counsel help you? Well, we prepare you. We don't prepare you like that, but we prepare questions. We prepare arguments to help you, to show you as the genuine claimant that you are. The minister's counsel's questions are going to be centered around showing you that you're not a credible, or you're not a genuine refugee claimant, or you don't need protection. But the your counsel is going to be centering their questions and their submissions based on that you are. So that's why it's beneficial to have a counsel, right? And I've seen and I will answer questions, guys. I will get to it, I promise. Just want to add one last note. And I've seen situations where they have not had counsel, and I made a video about it today too. I posted it up, where individuals did not have a counsel, and it showed. It really showed. This was mainly for residency obligation, that they did not meet it, and they were appealing their rejection to renew the residency. But the minister was going against it, right? And the minister had all these evidence, all the submissions in her submission, stating, um, sorry, losing my train of thought. Yes, stating why these individuals should not obtain the residency, and she actually drew back to their submission, to their disclosure, to the evidence that they had provided, and stated because of this reason, and because of this reason, this person should not be able. And then when it was their turn to make their submission, um, the individuals basically said, thank you so much for the opportunity. No, we don't have anything else to add. It's like, oh my God, if your counsel was there, they would have prevented that. They would have presented a strong case, a submission to why you should be accepted. Now, keep in mind, they had very good, strong humanitarian compassion grounds to be accepted, but it definitely showed that they did not have a counsel, and that could hurt them, right? Because the minister came in with very strong evidence, and evidence in their own disclosure, to argue against them. All right, let's get back to some questions. Okay. Need consultation price, need guidance. Sure, Elisar. My prices are as follows. If you require a refugee, like a full hour kind of thing, I charge 150 Canadian. And all these prices, guys, are on my website. If you need an emergency consultation, I charge about 200, and that's usually like if you need it within the next 2 hours. If you need like just a few questions, 15 minutes, $80. And if you just need like 30 minutes, it's 120. It just depends on your preferential, but um, I recommend usually, and that's why I put refugee consultation an hour, because there we can go over everything. There's so much to talk about when it comes to refugee claims that an hour will be taken, I promise you, and you can answer all your questions. So that's kind of my pricing. If you guys want to go on my link, it's in my bio. If you click it and it says like bsims.com service dash fees and stuff, that's the website that you go. Now you'll see a little warning that says, oh, you're leaving TikTok. Don't worry, my website's safe, guys. I created the website. So just, yeah, click and go through and you'll see my prices, and you can even pay online and book a time right there and then. Can a 22-year-old be accepted as a dependent in Canada? If yes, which cases? Yes, possibly can. There are certain situations that they can, but you would have to. I can't recall the situations. Also, is it 22? I think 22-year-olds can, but again, you would have to look at the circumstances. Included personal statement with BOC also evidences I are well documented. Okay, that's great. I need advice regarding PR pathway. Sure, peace of mind. I can provide, you can book a consultation. We can talk about PR pathways. I do different PR pathways as well. I do apologize, guys. I know a lot of you guys might have questions about PR and stuff. I'm sticking more towards refugee because that's a topic for tonight, but I usually host PR or other type of immigration pathways during the day, like around between 12 to 1, depending on my schedule. So those are like the days where I have those type of con- lives as well. Okay. I have a question about my dad's Canadian citizen, please. Unfortunately, guys, like I mentioned in the beginning of my live, I will not be answering case specific questions. Please keep it general. Um, it's just the method that I've decided to move forward with my lives, and I think yeah. So we're gonna go that way, and also please remember anything. Even if I answer your questions, it's not meant to be legal advice at all. Uh, thank you, Jumoke. I appreciate that. Guys, I've mentioned this in my other life, but if you guys don't know who Jumoke is, she is a wonderful RCIC as well here. Definitely visit her page. She has some really good information. So yeah, definitely check her out too. And she hosts lives as well. How about appeal? Someone refused after interview for refugee claim. So what do you mean refugee? Like sorry, not refugee. Interview. Like, do you mean eligibility interview or like the hearing in itself? Do refugees get money when they come to Canada? Okay, so here's the thing with social assistance, and I think a lot of people are confused by this. A lot of the individuals who are refugees, the media is covering that they get money, are refugees outside Canada refugee route. Those are the people who get social assistance. Now, keep in mind, a lot of that could also be that money they have to pay back. We have some programs where refugees and even immigrants can apply for like some sort of funding that they can obtain, and then they'll have to pay back later at very like lower cost kind of thing. Um, but yeah, that could be the situation. Sometimes it's social assistance. Now, the social assistance, I honestly don't know too much about, to be very frank with you, because it's not my alley, it's not my up my alley. Um, and honestly, I have yet, and I've been working in this sphere with refugees for a very, very long time. I have yet to really have someone really ask me about assistance from the government. The number one thing they ask me, and this is why I argue, it might be a waste of my time, but I argue with stupid people on TikTok where they say refugees come and take money from Canada, which is stupid, is they do not. The number one thing they will ask me is, when can I get my work permit so I can start working? And I'm sure, Candace, is not what you meant, but I'm just going on a little tangent here. um, and when people, and it really does upset me when people, make false accusations against refugees, I argue back. If you know me, you've known me on TikTok Live, you'll get the sense that I don't back down on confrontation. Um, and I argue back because I say, again, they come to Canada, they seek work permit to work, to pay taxes, to our economy. And keep in mind, they might not be able to actually remain in Canada. They might get rejected and get removed from Canada. So their arguments are null and void. Thank you, Rookie. I appreciate that. No, I know you were just wondering. It's a good question, and I'm glad that you're asking it and not, I mean, you're asking. But no, it's not really coming from our tax. And I think that's a misconception too. To be really honest, I'm not sure where the funding exactly comes from. I know that the loans that they give is a special program that they do have to pay back eventually. Uh, um, and it's not a lot of money either. It's like I think maximum is like $10,000 for the loan. And the only reason I know about the loan is because it's like a part of IRCC program. Um, and I think it's like 10,000 just to get them started, just so they can be able to rent a place, a little bit of money for food and stuff until they can get a job. And I think they have a certain amount of time frame where they have to pay that money back. But again, thank you, Candice, for asking. I appreciate anytime someone asks us about this. It's good information because I think there's so much misinformation out there, right? But with that being said, it is possible that refugees can get social assistance, but I just don't know it. I've never been asked, nor do I care because it's not up my alley, to be providing that information. Do refugees need medical? Yes. We do have a medical program for them, IFHP. Um, Kind of similar to OHIP, except they have a little bit more. Like they have some, for example, medical like specialist kind of availability. And I'll say this, and I think it's needed because a lot of refugees, when they come to Canada, they need that assistance. They need help with whether it's mental health or some like like eye examinations, etc. But guys, and this is really good information for everybody else. After May 1st, 2026, you do have to start paying for some of it. Not a lot, which is great. Um, Sorry guys, if you see me looking up, it's just people walk by my office and as it catches my eye. Sometimes my own shadow scares me, but that's a joke on the side. Anyways, you do have to pay a certain amount. I believe it's 30% into certain medical expenses. I I believe eye, dental, even maybe psychotherapy you might have to pay for, but other things like for example doctors going to the hospital, things like that, you don't need to pay for. And prescription, it's a very small amount that you would have to pay for as well. Again, I think these medical programs are necessary for refugee claimants because again, keep in mind they're coming from the worst situations possible around the world. I know the IFHP can be life-saving for especially for someone who has PTSD or trauma that they have to deal with. So I personally I wish we had that program for all of us. But it is a good program. But again, now people have to start paying into it as of May 1st. That is definitely a big change. And I think this all had to do a lot with uh, liberals getting tired of hearing from people saying we pay for their medical. It's like, oh God. So I think that's why they brought this in. The copay. Yes, it is the copay. Sorry, I missed a bunch of comments. What's the name of the program? Interim Federal Health Program. It's essentially the name is what it is. It's just like a kind of like a short time medical program that you have. If someone reports me to the border agency, will that affect my refugee claim? Depends on what they're reporting, and it might. So I don't know. You might want to seek legal advice on that one. To be really frank, really interested to understand itself. No, again, I appreciate anyone who's asking questions. Questions are great to ask, to have better understanding. Honestly, I didn't even know much about this stuff until I became an immigration consultant focused on refugees. It's a whirlwind. So it's very confusing, and I understand where the misinformation comes from. And my biggest thing is that misinformation comes from the media and from people who know nothing about it, and then they start talking about it. So I again totally appreciate where when people ask questions. Could you please advise my friend hearing is getting closer, but she doesn't have a lawyer? So just specify, guys, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an immigration consultant with RCIC-IRB designation, which allows me to talk about and represent people at the Immigration Refugee Board. Um, but yes, I can assist. I can represent them, but they would need to, contact me and maybe book a consultation. And yes, I can definitely help. If I'm available and they already have a date, I might be able to assist. Just ask them to send me an email or book a consultation. Again, my link and my phone number and my email is all up on the uh, sorry, my bio. If you just click on my face up there and you'll go straight to my bio, you'll get the link to my website and my email and my phone number too. Yes, copay. Yes. Could you? Yes. So long kiss, good night. I believe I answered your question just now. Hi, please. Being on income support and not having a job as a refugee cause of depression, will that affect my claim? Will that affect? Okay, so no, guys. Again, refugee claim is not about you having a job, right? It's not an HNC application where they focus on establishment and humanitarian compassion grounds. Mm, Sorry, I'm just going to get a little bit of water. Refugee claim focuses on you having a real fear to return and a real risk. Risk is like the focus of it. If this individual was returned to their country, will this face risk or possibly threat to their life? We are looking at section 96 and 97 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, where it defines what a um, convention refugee or a protected person is. Those are the focuses. Their focus is not on whether you have a job. The focus is not on whether you have friends sending in letters of support of what a great person this is. Again, those are more specific to other types of cases, or HNC grounds and things like that, right? Now, you can get a job. Like if you get a work permit, you can get a job as a refugee claimant. I have never, in my time, gone into a hearing. Actually, even when I've witnessed hearings too, have they ever asked, "Do you have a job?" Refugee claims they don't. They don't. Right? That's not their concern. Their concern is to determine that you're credible and you have a real founded fear. So their focus is on something else again, but if a different type of application, maybe that might be something that they question, right? So it just again depends on the type of application you have. Could you? I think I answered that. Okay. Hi. Okay. Yep. Okay. So why are people undocumented? So I think maybe you're getting. So kind of keep in mind, undocumented and that phrase is mostly used in the United States, and I feel like sometimes when people come and say undocumented, they think, Canadians. Now, there are Canadians who are out of status. That's kind of the term we use here because it's like most people have come with, well, almost everybody, unless you come the irregular route or you cross borders, most people will come with a status, but then their status will run out and then they don't renew, they don't do anything about it. That's why we say they're out of status. That makes them non-compliant. That could potentially reach to a point that they are removed from Canada. Now, keep in mind, if you're out of status, it will lead to possibly a deportation if you leave it. Anyways, why some people are documented, I don't know. Refugee claimants are not undocumented. Technically, if they're going through the immigration process, they have a refugee claim status, right? They're able to remain in Canada. They're able to apply for work permit or study permit to work or study in Canada. So in that sense, they're not undocumented. People just run out of status and they might choose to run with it and stay out of status. I've seen some wild reasons why people do that. Sometimes it's out of pure laziness, sometimes it's pure confusion that they don't understand what those dates mean on their work permit or study permit. Um, Sometimes it's bad advice. Like I had someone on my live a few days ago and I got really bad advice from a lawyer. I said lawyer, but it could have been a consultant too. I think most people still are a little confused about lawyer consultants. So that's it. Or sometimes I've even seen this. They get bad advice from their family or friends. Like bad advice. I've heard situations where someone said, "Oh, you don't need to reapply for something. It's fine. You don't need it. You already got a visa once." Or they this is the most unfortunate one. They think that this date on their visa, which could be longer than a study permit or work permit, is the date they need to be looking at. So it's a lot of different reasons. People mostly I've seen are just confused or they got bad advice. Those are the main reasons. I never really come across someone who had malicious intent to remain in Canada without a status. Now keep in mind, if someone is out of status, they can't do a lot of things, right? They can't really have documentation to obtain, OHIP or driver's license or things like that. At least I don't think so. No, I'm pretty sure they asked for like their immigration documents. Um, so yeah, I don't know. People, it's very unfortunate, especially when they get really bad advice. I feel for them because it's like I say, don't ever listen to your friends and family. They're not legal professionals. Stop listening to them. And guys, if you are a follower of mine, you know what I say. Please do not listen to your family friends, especially if they're not licensed. They don't know what the hell. They're great. Family and friends are great. But when it comes to legal advice, lawyer, consultant, licensed, only people you should be listening to. And good ones, right? Don't go find an agency that doesn't have the licensing and listen to them. Because I feel like sometimes people get those confused too. They think like some agencies where they say that we can help you immigrate to Canada. They give illegal advice and they get screwed that way too. Okay. Back in the day, 520 from open work permit for women and with two small children. Sorry, OW. What's OW? OW only insisted for 5 months. I think Ontario works. Sorry. Yeah. OW Ontario works doesn't give that much. Yeah, I know that for sure. What is the lawyer's job during the hearing? Will they be asked questions? Thank you. That's a really good question. And I kind of covered it a little bit earlier. Um, so a lawyer slash consultant, remember a consultant has to have a designation to be able to represent you at the hearing. Our job is to essentially present your case to the best way possible. Now, at the hearing, we will be asking you questions. If you have witnesses, we ask your witnesses questions. And if a minister is intervening, they do the same thing. And at the very end, we can make a final submission, right? Um, but essentially, our job is to make sure that things are proceeding correctly. Certain things are considered, like for example, if you're a vulnerable person or a member of the LGBTQ plus community or a woman who has faced violence, certain guidelines are followed too. Questions are followed in a certain way, a certain manner. Um, Sometimes I've actually even been in hearings where I speak Farsi, and part of my job is to also make sure that the translator was translating things correctly. I've also seen in like previous cases too where lawyers have caught that too, where translators were not translating things not out of maliciousness, but because they just misunderstood. So I feel like that's part of our job too if you speak the language of your client. Um, but essentially, it's to present your case best way possible, strongly as possible, and to ensure the right questions are being asked so you can present yourself in the best way possible too. Okay. I'm open to listening. My friend was on Ontario Works, and it was a time for her to sponsor her spouse. It was denied. Uh, Just trying to think back, spousal. Yeah, that definitely could be the case. Remember, a spouse, you don't, sorry, this is going to bad spousal sponsorships, but you have to have an undertaking. Now, I'm curious exactly why the officer, like what the stated situation was, because you don't necessarily need to have a financial requirements unless there's a dependent of a dependent of a the dependent of a dependent has a child or something like that. So I'm very curious what the reasoning was that they rejected the person because they were on unter works. I'm just trying to recall if being on assistance might prevent you. I know if you are paying alimony or things like that, that could prevent you. I have to go back. I'm sorry. It's been a minute since I looked at spousal sponsorship, so I'm gonna have to get back on that one. Yes, what works for one person doesn't necessarily work in another situation. Then, because you're out of status. Sorry, I'm not sure what that one was referring to. But some family friends have their own experiences. Oh, right. I think that's a comment where I'm saying don't listen to your family friends. They have their experiences, but again, and this is one of the first things I remember when I was studying immigration consultancy, where my instructor was saying. She said, "You might think two cases are exactly alike, exactly, like down to the bone alike, but one little thing can change it. One little small element can really change the case. And like for example, it could be express entry case, right? You would think two cases are exactly alike, but maybe one person has one extra year of studying, or they have the element of having French, like they're proficient in French, and it makes all the difference in the world. So someone's experience, and I say this because someone's experience is not legal advice, right? They can have some sort of experience, but it could be completely wrong, but could not fit your situation. And that's why, guys, it's important to talk to a professional, because they can evaluate your situation. And that's why it's really important to be very upfront about your situation, too, right? Be very upfront about your situation. Tell your counsel your entire situation, and so they can help you to pick the right pathway. Okay. All right. Do they look at cost of healthcare needs they have? Sorry, who's they? I think I'm missing, guys. I do apologize. I might. What type of evidence strengthens LGBT plus Q cases the most? It's not. It's not really the LGBTQ evidence in itself. Like you don't need to show your 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 sexuality or your preference. At least not in my experience. They'll take the word for that. What they will look at is the country conditions that you're coming from. For example, I'll name my own country, right? You are a member of the LGBTQ plus community. They're going to look specifically and see, well, if this person was returned, what would happen to them, right? Um, in Iran, you can get persecuted for that, right? That would be some basis, and they would like ensure your credibility, like your you're being genuine. Now that could be for different types of things that you can provide, right? It could be medical records. It could be, you going. Again, guys, this is really specific to your case. I'm not telling you anything. Just different types of things I've seen is like being part of an organization, being leader of an organization that's LGBTQ place, those are just some of the things that you can. But again, it just depends on the situation. And there's no real specific thing, especially for something like that, for you to provide evidence of. But the main thing that we'll look at is okay, great, this person, we believe they're credible. But what would happen to them if they return to the country of persecution? That's something that I found that they look very closely in. And what has happened to them in that country of persecution? A lot of people, they don't come here and come out and they're like and indicate their sexuality. That's a member of the LGBTQ plus. Sometimes they do it back home and things have happened to them back home, right? Those are some things that they provide too. It's like, well, I came out and people found out and they went after me. Without going to hearing, can a lawyer represent me for RPD? Yeah, definitely, senior. They can, immigration consultant and lawyers get, again, the right designation. They can definitely represent you. But I would think the most important element, sorry, I'm just thinking here, would be the hearing in itself that you need help with. Again, sim for Anna, I honestly cannot answer that. Your case, and that's why consultations are important, is that you would go through with a counsel to see where the deficiencies are, what the concerns are, right? Because sometimes, and I will say this, guys, not every case is meant to be a refugee case. And I cannot repeat this enough. Sometimes, again, refugee cases, your refugee claim should be the last option because, again, refugee claims are so specific to certain people because there's great consequences if you get rejected or withdrawn or abandoned, whatever, right? Sometimes I have found that people fit better with an H&C case. Straight up. Sometimes I find and say, like, listen, you don't have a strong case for risk, or you don't have a real, like, strong case for refugee claim. What you do have is hardship, and maybe that would fit better than H&C or something similar to that. So again, and the reason why I say this is because I can't really tell off of here, and also I'm not giving legal advice right now. Legal advice is for consultations, but also it depends on your situation very much. And there's so many questions I would have to ask to even determine that. My friend ended up on ODSP and the decliners with. Am I just blanking? I have to go back and see what does they say about social assistance. Yeah, but I think I'm blanking tonight, guys. Just letting you know. Sometimes when I get so focused on a certain type of application, I blank on the other ones. So don't mind me. Are there any legal options pro agency deferral that should be considered before withdrawal? So actually, you might be barred from a pro or an agency. A deferral, what do you mean deferral? Like deferral of removal? Again, it's situation, and deferrals are very, very hard. Not hard, but you would have to have a real argument for it, right? What I would say, and this is for everyone, anyone who is thinking of withdrawing their refugee claim, speak. I cannot preface this enough for a counsel. Sometimes something you would have to do is with an immigration lawyer only. For example, if you're withdrawing, but you need to remain in Canada, sometimes a lawyer might be a better option. Sometimes a consultant can do that. So it just depends on your situation. But you should be speaking with a counsel. So if you want to withdraw your case, guys, remember there are consequences. You have a departure order uh, that could that could come to effect. And Aladia, I would recommend you speak with someone regarding that because your study permit might not help you remain in Canada. Just putting that out there. All right, guys. Again, please remember, speak to a counsel if you were thinking of withdrawing. Sometimes, even if if you have a work permit and if it's connected to your refugee claim, that does not stop the deportation. So keep that in mind. Speak to your counsel or book a consultation. It's really, really important. And with that, guys, I'm going to leave it here because I need to get home. I've been here for almost 12 hours. So have a wonderful evening, guys. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. And Jumoke, it was so nice to have you here again. Thank you for being at my live. And you are the best. And Everyone else, you guys are the best too. I love every one of my followers. You guys support my channel, you support my page, and I really, really, every single one of you guys, I really appreciate you. You guys are awesome. And I'll be back tomorrow. I'm trying to stay away from having lives on weekends, but tomorrow I will have another one. So I'll speak with you guys then. Have a wonderful evening and bye for now. Bye, guys.